Um, anyway, so I have some great things tonight. I want to share a couple of different clinical insights, and then I believe we have some questions as well from the audience.
We sure do.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll dig in with the clinical insights. I know we're a minute behind here. And I have a couple, they kind of range all over the board here. And the first one I'll start off with kind of hits home a little bit. So I guess it can be kind of a heavy topic, but I don't want it to be that. So I'll dive right into it. So I recently had, so the clinical insights, if you're a new listener here, the clinical insights are when I'm in practice and I have these kind of moments where I think, wow, this would be something that would be great to share. So this is one of those moments where I, learned something or experienced something in the practice, and I wanted to be able to share it with everyone here. So this particular one hits a little bit home because it's heavy. Recently, we lost one of our team members, one of our staff members. His name is Alberto, and Alberto took his life. And I want to share this because unfortunately, this happens way too frequently and with way too many people. And it was just shortly after that, and I know this hits home for you as well. This is one of your friends and one of your team members. Shortly after that, one of our clients came in, and in that moment, he was sharing with me that he just lost his brother to an apparent suicide. And I realized in that moment that we all have stuff, and we always think that our stuff is the only stuff that's taking place in the face of the earth. But unfortunately, I've been around these particular scenarios many times. And so tonight, I just wanted to share some of my insights and some of the things that have helped me kind of navigate these waters with each experience that I've had with these experiences. I think with these experiences, a lot of emotions pop up, and some of those can be, anger. They could be fear. They can be, loss, sadness, a little bit of everything. And I think it's fair to have all those emotions. And when I was talking to a young gentleman who lost his brother, we had a really good moment of kind of reflecting. So some of the things that we did that I thought were really helpful is that we celebrated. I know that sounds crazy, and I know that sounds sometimes when people say, oh, you need to celebrate life. If you lose someone and you celebrate their life, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That celebrating their life really, really helps in understanding and being able to reflect upon all the greatness that individual, was, and all the great things that they did on this earth, or anything that we can peel out from that particular situation. So that is probably the first thing. And I want to share two little subtleties that I think, literally we could talk about this kind of conversation for hours upon hours, but I want to share two things that I thought, after all these years of having people close to me that have passed away, that have kind of probably these two things, I think, sum things up pretty well. And I think help navigate the troubled waters that we can be in. And number one was this, is that one, recognize that when someone passes, especially if they've taken their own life, there's nothing either one of us or any one of us could ever have done. And I think that's a fair statement to say. And all the people, unfortunately, I've known several that have taken their lives. And I say that because every single one of us, it's our human behavior and our human nature to feel some guilt, to feel as if there's something we could have said, something we could have done, some extra phone call, some extra text, something, and almost feel bad that we missed it. And this goes through every one of our brains, and it goes through our hearts, and we all feel it deeply. Even if we're feeling bold and strong about it all, we still deep down feel that. And I don't think it's incorrect if you think deep down that you could have done something. I don't think that feeling is wrong. I think we all need to have that feeling. And this is the part that gets a little weird. I think we need to have that feeling and own the feeling that, yes, I could have done something. I could have done something more. And I say that so we keep alive the idea that what we do matters. And who we are on any given day, that it matters. The fact that we care and love for each other matters. The fact that we smile at each other, that it matters. The fact that we acknowledge each other on a daily basis, that we put aside our differences, and that we allow ourselves to be bigger than the current issues. And I'm saying all these things because these are all things that my friend Alberto represented. He was the individual that he didn't have a black and white. He didn't have you're on this side, I'm on this side. He literally was spreading love to everybody. And when I think about that, then I think, oh man, should I, is there anything else I could have done? And I always want to have the belief that the answer is yes, I could have done more. So it keeps alive in me the fact that what I do matters, because I know that Alberto's life mattered. And this was the conversation I was having with the gentleman who lost his brother in my office the other day. It was literally 2 days apart that this happened. And by us being able to talk that way, to think that we could, it keeps the spirit alive that we should be kind, that we should love one another and put the small stuff away. Because that is exactly, again, what my friend Alberto did. And there was two more things. And I think these two come with a little bit of experience, which I wouldn't wish anyone to have a lot of experience in friends or colleagues or, acquaintances passing or taking their own lives. And there's two things. And one I shared with a young gentleman that came in. I said, listen, if you've ever heard anyone say or actually believe the statement that God has a plan for us all, if that's true, then let's not judge this moment. I grew up, and I'm going to kind of keep it as real as I can here. I grew up a Catholic. So in the Catholic Church, that's not something that's acceptable under the eyes of God. So you can't celebrate their life. Well, I don't really buy into that. I think everyone's life should be celebrated. And I also believe that if God truly had a plan, this was his plan for this particular situation. So in this particular situation, it was wonderful that Whitney, you were a big part of this. He brought so many people together. His family brought so many people together, and we were literally able to share it out and spread the love that Alberto gave to us regularly. So that was wonderful. And I think if we experience loss and you have the unique opportunity to surround yourself with friends and family who can find that part of them to help celebrate that individual's loss, regardless of the reason. And I say regardless because, yes, in this particular scenario, he took his own life. And we have sadness and maybe anger there, but maybe there's a car accident. Maybe someone spends all their energy being angry at the drunk driver, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't allow us to celebrate. Maybe there's, an accident or a murder or something like that. No matter what the cause, I think it's important that we celebrate. And so that's where I think if we allow ourselves to kind of revisit the conversation, if we believe that, God has a plan for all of us, let's not judge it and let's put them in this situation. The other part is I'm going to share a little bit of insight. I have no basis for this. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't pretend to be either one of those. I have a little experience, and this is my interpretation of it. And I want to say this because often people will ask me still to this day, I got a text just about an hour ago wanting to know the details, the why. Were there problems? Were there demons? Were there financial issues? Were there emotional relationship issues? People want to know all these. And I want to say to everyone that has ever lost someone that is trying to justify it, the answer is no to all of those. And those are not worthy. And the reason I say that is because the moment we allow ourselves to say yes to any one of those, and that's just our brain, our human brain that needs some justification. We need a scapegoat. We need to blame something. The danger here is this: the moment we say, yes, that was why, there was a demon, there was this, there was dark days, whatever, then we, to some degree, are going to justify it for the next person. That if you have that dark day, if you have that demon, if you have that relationship issue, if you have a financial crash, whatever it may be, if we say, yes, that's the reason why, and we accept that as the reason, because there's no reason to take life. There's no justifiable, it's not my book. There's no justifiable reason to take life. Yet if we do that, we let our small part of our brain get involved with the why behind it, then we kind of dismiss it all. And we set the situation up for the next person. It might be more vulnerable for them. So those are the two things I shared with the young man that came in that lost his brother and said, It was obviously it's not something I expect to have a conversation with. Well, I'm about to treat someone, give them a chiropractic adjustment or acupuncture or something. Yeah, these are real things that happen in life. So I wanted to share this as a clinical insight. And I, for me personally too, every time I get to talk about it, I get to appreciate my friend Alberto a little bit more. And so this is a little bit of an ode to him as well. And so, I know this is near and dear to your heart as well. Anything you want to share there?
It's such a beautiful, poignant thing to bring up and so real in our lives right now. I think that loss is part of what makes life so special. The fact that it is not eternal. So having a recognition of what that process is like is so helpful to all of us because it is something that we will all experience in our way. And what a great guy Alberto was. He's so easy to love. And I think for me on the tail end of this experience, my focus has been like, just continue to love him as much as I always have.
Yeah, continue to love him. And it gets easier every day. And I think that's the beauty of it. And I hope that's for everybody. It literally gets easier to love him every day. And also to take that love and spread it around, like literally do it. And it's, we're so fortunate to have you in my life, my wife, and, our team. And there's always an emphasis and a focus there. And it's, in these moments, I'm forever grateful for those tonight. And I hope everyone listening tonight, for whatever, and I know this isn't like an awesome topic to talk about, but at the same time it is. We're all going to lose people. And if we allow ourselves to get to that space of celebration, yeah, I feel so much different. Yeah, it really feels so much different. So, all right. So that was my clinical insight. I wanted to share that. Again, that's real for us. And, and it's that's our health, our health, our wealth, our relationships. It's all really one here. All right. So I'm going to move on, not to leave that at any lesser of a point, but nonetheless, I'm going to slide on to another one here. Another clinical insight, and this is real neat one. So young lady, and I'm always claiming everyone young, and she's probably about, I don't know exact age, but she's probably close to 60. I met her for the first time today. Wonderful human being, and she lost over 100 pounds. Now this is prior to me, so I didn't play any role in this. So of course I'm fascinated. I'm a student here, so I asked her what and how. Like, how did you lose 100 pounds? What made the decision? There was two things she said to me. It was real fast. She said, I went to a whole food plant-based diet. And then the second part is she decided that she no longer wanted to use the medical route, which every time there was a symptom, it caused another sickness. And these are her words. So it was pretty fascinating. So this is part of the platform here at the Health Made Simple show, that we're always talking about, like, let's get back to basics. We get back to God's garden. If it comes from root plant tree, walks in the garden, swims in the sea, we got a good shot at moving ourselves in the direction of health. So I wanted to share that. She lost over 100 pounds. This was in the last, I think she said 4 years. So this is not over a decade. And I think she's about 60 based on what I saw from her. And that means she wasn't like 25 and losing 100 pounds. She was, in a later part of life that sometimes it's not easier. So I was super, super excited for her. And what's really cool about that, when I see someone that has that type of fortitude, and she probably, and I think she said she even has like another 50 or so to lose. The beauty is that I know that she's up for anything now. And because to tackle something like that, to make big changes in a person's life, I'm really excited for her, and there's a lot to go here. So just wanted to share that. There's one way to lose 100 pounds, get back to eating God's garden, whole food, plant-based diet. And almost never is going to move you in the wrong direction. All right, another clinical insight. And I hear this one all the time. This is a very, very common one. Of course, I'm asking everybody, how you taking care of yourself, how's your diet, how's the nutrition, you putting good food into your body. And that's usually, you putting good things into your body. The answer is yes, or pretty good. That's usually the standard is pretty good. This particular time it was yes, but I do have a sweet tooth. And shockingly enough, I hear that one all the time. It'll be a yes, but I have a sweet tooth. And this time it actually made me a little curious to say, well, what does your sweet tooth actually look like? Like, are you eating, candy all day? I said, yeah, I'm eating chocolate all day long. So what was fascinating is this guy's probably about 53, 54 years old, and he's super, super active. So he literally was headed out to go surfing right after we got done with me. And he's physically active hours upon hours a day, almost a little bit addicted to it. And then it opened up a really nice conversation for what's taking place here. So one, a little bit of a sweet tooth is not okay. The reason the door opened up for us to have a conversation. So most guys do not talk about their diet because most of their diet is not good and they don't want to change it. So therefore they don't talk about it. That's a pretty typical conversation with most guys. The reason he opened up and was willing to have a little deeper conversation is because I said, man, sweet tooth. And I said, you mean literally sugar all day? He said, yes. And I said, I know it sounds so simple, but it is also the number one cause of heart disease and diabetes in our country. And those are the two biggest killers. And he's like, oh, it's interesting because I have heart disease. And I said, well, he's literally face down on my table. And I said, well, do your doctor talk to you about, not eating sugar? He's like, no. He's like, they know I'm active. I said, man, you can still damage your body by eating sugar. So if you put something bad in your body, regardless of your physical activity, yes, it might help burn off a couple of, the blood sugar levels a little bit, but you're still going to damage the arterial wall. You're still going to create a lot of inflammation in the body. And when I said inflammation to him, he says, do you think that's why I hurt all over my body every day? Which was, an interesting note for him to make. And I said, sure, absolutely. If you're eating sugar 5-6 times a day, every time you eat sugar, it does produce inflammation in your body. Sugar actually shrinks your brain too. So it's a leading cause of things like dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. So we had this conversation just a little bit. And what I brought up to him, because I piqued his, I guess, curiosity on a whole nother level. And he said, well, why do you think it is? And then we got talking a little bit, and he said he's an all-in or all-out type of person. So he went from 12 sodas a day, or what did he say? 12 sodas a week, I think, or 15 sodas a week to 0. But he flipped it into exercise. Now he's all into exercise. And then I asked him, have you ever been depressed? And he said, yes. If I don't exercise, I get depressed. And this is where it's interesting. This is why I want to share it with you guys. Sometimes these subtleties of being addicted to foods or to stimulus, to exercise, to drugs, to alcohol, to sex, whatever it may be, sometimes at the root of it, there's a deficiency in dopamine. And that's testable. You can actually do a test to find out where your dopamine levels are. So when you get down to it, he says, why do you think I'm so addicted to that? He's like, I know it's bad for me. It's one of those things I know I have to tackle. I said, well, this could be 2 reasons. One, sugar is very addicting. That's number one. And you literally can enlarge the size of the sugar receptor, and it literally outgrows and outpaces all the other receptors. So the little receptors on your cells scream at your brain to get sugar every time your mood changes, your energy changes, or you need a little, pop of energy. That's one cause of it. And the other part, the cool part is, heck, 2 days without sugar, 3 days without sugar, you're burning all out of your body to reset the system. We do it every single year with our clients, so it's really workable. But the other challenge is this. One of the reasons people use sugar so frequently and have a sweet tooth per se is because every time you eat sugar, you get a drip of dopamine. And dopamine is essentially the same thing that, like literally a heroin addict likes. They get a little bit of rush they get a dopamine push. So in the event that you are clinically deficient in dopamine, and how you can test for this. So it's actually a simple urine test. We run them in our office. Yet the challenge here is one of the ways by which you can become deficient is through poor gut health. And then we tapped into that a little bit, and all these light bulbs went off: antibiotic use, et cetera. It went back to, he started, eating more sugar after rounds of antibiotics. So the big cycle here. So in the event you have a little sweet tooth, don't laugh it off. Don't joke it off. It's still not healthy for us. It's still not good for us. And there's no such thing as a little bit of a sweet tooth. Most likely you have a sweet tooth that you're always trying to fulfill or always trying to obey. So be mindful of that. And there's a lot of different ways. One, you can just go cold turkey, safe and comfortable to do. And within 2 or 3 days, you'll no longer be addicted to your sugar. You do have to replace it with some good stuff, like good healthy foods, fibers and fats, fiber, fat, and protein. You can test for it, find out if you literally have a deficiency in dopamine, which is then going to make your body kind of do whatever it takes to get a dump of dopamine. Otherwise, you can end up like clinically depressed, that kind of stuff. Or again, you can just choose to start to move your diet away from sugar, but without going cold turkey, going to be tough. The sugar thing, when you have that sweet tooth or a little bit of we'll call it a little bit of an addiction, at some point you got to draw a line in the sand and say, all right, I'm going to put this down, give it, 48 hours, 72 hours. And in that period of time, the beauty is it'll be burnt out of the body and you can start fresh. So it's not as hard as we think it is. All right. So that was clinical insight number 3. I got one more.
All right.
Yes. And this one's a little bit different, yet a good example. So this wonderful couple came in this afternoon, referred to some of my other friends that are clients over in Texas. And they have this young 7-year-old boy, and he has this very rare genetic disorder called, I have to look at my notes, just called CSF. It's cardiofasciocutaneous syndrome. It was the first time I've been present to it, but I did some homework on it. My client in Texas talked to me about it 2 days ago. So I did my homework on it to understand what was going on with gene pathways, et cetera. And I knew it'd be troublesome. In this one, it affects the heart. It affects the face. Like the face usually becomes really small and the forehead becomes really, really large. And it affects the skin in many different ways. It can wrinkle, it cannot grow. Ultimately, this is a genetic condition where the body, usually the young person, has a failure to thrive. And often it's linked to some gut issues. And this is why I'm bringing this up. In these scenarios, in the information I received, they've been to all kinds of doctors all over the place and coming up short for the structures in the face, they can't put any muscles on their body, very weak, some autistic type, symptoms, you might say, and lack of energy, very emotional, all different types of things. So they've been trying to deal with all of those symptoms. And sometimes when we have all those symptoms and we have these really rare genetic disorders, whatever it may be, if we want to get healthy, getting back to the root cause or where the core of our health comes from, which is our gut, is always a solid plan. So what's really cool in this situation, they were telling me all about all these different things. And I said, well, what's your instincts? What have you been thinking? And the mom said, I think he can't digest his food. So we started, and she says, I hope you're not going to get mad for us or yell at us for this, but I don't think he could digest his food. The moment we give him red meat, he vomits. He can eat a little bit of salmon and he has no problem with sugar, but they've been trying to take gluten out of his life and trying to take carbs out of his life. So that immediately tells me, and for anyone that's listening to our show, if you can't digest meat, but you can digest carbohydrates and sugar, we have a digestive issue. That means you have a digestive enzyme issue. So what's so cool is that the parents, in their lack of health, but their ability to be intuitive and aware with their son, decided to start giving him a digestive enzyme. And they noticed that he's vomiting less and he's not having less pain in his gut and stuff like that. So that was a nice starting point. And they said, where do we begin, Doc? Fortunately, I came in high regard, and someone kind of really propped me up very nicely. And they said, they told us you'd definitely be able to help us. And I said, I don't know that I can change your child, but I know the path for the human body to get healthy, and we will put your son on this path. And just to see that, literally the tears roll up in her eyes with the possibility of someone finally saying, we're going to work on helping you getting your child healthy. Little side note here. So that was wonderful. And we will start that. They're going to do a Zoom. We'll sit down with the whole family, talk about it. And I think what's beautiful is they're on board. And listen, it's not rocket science. So I don't have to be an expert in CFS. My job is to know that pathway, know that path, that strategy it takes to get humans to be superhuman and to be healthy. So what's really cool here is this. So check this out. This is the second part of the same one. So the father says, and there's something else wrong today. And he's like, I go to pick him up and he's crying. So he doesn't have really communication skills or anything. And he really can't walk either. He has to be assisted to walk. So when I go to pick him up, he's crying and like he's in pain. And so they're like, we think something's misaligned in his spine, but they don't really know how to even articulate this. Again, being intuitive, they think something's going on, but every time they touch him, he's crying. So he sits down on my table, and, and I asked permission, of course, if I could put my hands on him. They said yes, and put my hands on him. Sure enough, I start palpating. He starts crying really bad. So moms and dads, listen up here, because this is a moment where sometimes you have to trust your doctor if you think you can trust your doctor. So no doubt he was super misaligned, and it was so obvious. So we call spinal misalignments subluxations. And a subluxation is the sub meaning just less than. So that's what sub means, less than. A luxation means it is dislocated. So a subluxation, when you have a spinal subluxation, you're not dislocated, but it's less than that. It's a misalignment. Well, he had one that was probably teetering between subluxation and a true luxation, where it's actually like you're dislocating. And that was right between like his rib cage and his spine. And it's because his parents had to constantly pick him up, but they'd pick him up by his arms, not knowing he was heavy, a 7-year-old kid. And he has no muscle tone. So it was literally misaligning all his vertebrae in his rib cage. And I knew how uncomfortable this adjustment was going to be. So I told them, your son's probably going to cry. It'll only be brief. He will probably take a big breath after that, and he's going to be fine. You guys good? And they're like, yes, whatever. And they were good. They were surprisingly calm. And just like I said, I adjusted him, just huge, like popping, adjusting noise, like massive. It was almost like music to my ears, and just as I expected, because most of us that are doing this work, we know the process, that we're going to have to kind of bridge this gap where the adjustment might actually be a little bit uncomfortable, and then the nervous system instantly gets to relax. And so it was literally beautiful to watch this young boy go from this gasping pain, kind of patting at his head, like because he's uncomfortable, but not knowing how to articulate any of it, to he cried for probably a good 30 minutes, pretty good cry. I'm sure they heard it in the waiting room, to then calm his eyes. Beautiful. Yeah. So my clinical insight there is a couple of things. One, getting on the path of health is always a plan. No matter how dire, whatever the boogly woogly disease is, it is always a good plan to get on the path of health. And second is, parents, trust your intuitions. When you can block fear out and be more intuitive, that is when you become your greatest help to your children. So, and for these two parents, and I literally did high five them and I fist bumped them, and I will see them again another day. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it's so beautiful when you can provide relief for anyone who's like in a bit of discomfort, and especially when you have individuals who are so loved by like their community and their families. So it becomes this entire experience when the 7-year-old kiddo is feeling better. It's like the parents feel better. There's these trickling effects when we're able to take care of our health.
You know what's interesting too? I still get the question all the time: do you adjust kids? And the answer is a resounding yes. They don't articulate our owies as well. Like they don't say, Mom, I think I got a kink in my neck, or I think there's a misalignment in my spine. They don't have that, or, to whether it be a 5-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid or a young teenager. They don't have. A little while later, I saw a young football player. He literally came in crooked like this. His head's sitting on one side of his head. And just like, yeah, I can't move my head. But he still went to football practice. Yeah, like just, and I get that because I did that as well. Yeah, do kids get adjusted? Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. They respond wonderful. More often than not, kids, when they get adjusted, they laugh. There was another conversation I was having with a little girl and her mom. That was another little girl. I think she was 5 or 7, gorgeous little girl, and she was really nervous. So today we didn't adjust. We just got her in the office, let her lie on the table, used a couple little like machines that, they vibrate and have fun stuff. And they got to see the dogs, and the mom understood completely. And I really appreciate it that when the child was lying face down, I was just talking to her, getting her comfortable. I said, I kind of gave her that, not today. Today is just a moment for us to get used to each other. And that relationship, that building the trust with your doctor is so important. And that the family doctor kind of thing is almost a lost thing, where literally the doctor knew everyone in the family and, knew everything that was going on in the world within that family. That's kind of a lost art to some degree, but on a one-on-one basis, when you can have that, it's really important. So again, every situation is a little bit different. If your child can get familiar with their doctors and they're comfortable around them, it's always more beneficial because we can have really good conversations versus just with the mom or just with the dad.
Beautiful. And then would you say that you could see kiddos kind of younger than talking, little babies?
Yeah. So yeah, my youngest is 6 hours old.
Oh,
Yeah. And she is now a chiropractor. That's what's super cool. Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So the little girl that was nervous today, she asked if her puppy dog could come next time and get adjusted, which then people ask, do you adjust animals? Yes, we adjust animals. If it's got a spine, it's got a nervous system, and that spine moves in many different ways. And if it misaligns, it creates interference with the nervous system. And if we can remove that interference, then that entity, human, dog, whatever it's going to be, will function at a higher level. So what was neat, I said, yes, your dog can get adjusted. And I was explaining to her that I adjust a dog like I adjust an infant, which then like kind of made her feel like more of an adult. Because I said, like I adjust a baby differently than I would adjust a young girl like yourself. And the way we adjust a lot of infants and even animals is really more of a contact versus what you might think of when you go to a chiropractor. Like they might, move your body around, you hear a popping or a clicking. And oftentimes when we adjust infants, that's not the process. It's a little bit different technique that we use. So if you think, man, I'm not going to have my 1-year-old or my 6-month-old get adjusted, I could never imagine that. It's totally different. It's totally different.
Beautiful. I wonder if thinking about this sweet 7-year-old that you got to see recently, you mentioned that the parents put them on a digestive enzyme, which is so awesome. Is there one that that you love and trust?
Yeah, which was fascinating. We had this conversation with them. So they actually went on the one that I recommend the most. I don't even know where they got it from. There's one that we use called Zypan, and it's fantastic. And the reason I use that one the most, so it has hydrochloric acid in it. And the way I described it to them, so I really wanted to edify them and encourage them to continue to be intuitive, because they knew that the food was not breaking down. And if your food doesn't break down in what we call the upper GI, which is like where your stomach is, I don't know if you can see on the camera here, but like right at the, at the end of your sternum, if your food doesn't break down there and your belly immediately gets full, like right after you eat, after that, everything's going to be bad as well. So the goal is that we actually have and add or supplement in some hydrochloric acid, which is a digestive enzyme. And that way that acid is sitting there. And then when you eat it dissolves it and sends it to the small intestine, which then sends it into the large intestine and down to the cecum in the right sizes and shape that it should be. And in this what's so fascinating, and that's why I believe that when we're listening, the answers come. For this little boy, what they said is once they started giving the digestive enzyme, they said it feels like he's gotten a little stronger. This disease, I don't even like calling it disease, this process that he has going on, it's a failure to thrive. It really, at the root of it, it's the inability to absorb nutrients. And that's why they can't thrive. They can't build muscle. They barely build bone up, and their head kind of changes shape and everything. So Zypan is what we usually use. Typically, I'll have someone take about 2 before a meal. Another interesting conversation came up with it. If it's really hard to tear physically, usually you need more digestive enzymes. So like if you think a piece of red meat, like if you try to tear it physically with your hand, that's tough. There's a lot of collagen in there. There's fat and there's protein. Those foods you definitely want to make sure you're using digestive enzymes. I mean, even as adults, very, very beneficial. So simple answer, Zypan. Where they got it, I never got that far. Never figured out. For all I know, it's from my client who's over in Texas, because she has like her own like entire wall of supplements, and she's like the mommy doctor for everyone down where she lives.
That's so awesome. Lucky
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple questions from the crowd. Should we get started on those?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Amazing. All right. So, do you have any suggestions for a good pre-workout drink?
Pre-workout drink. Well, pre-workout drink, I think that is something. So I'll give it a couple different angles here. I think pre-workout drink comes from almost like my growing up era. I guess it's still around, but the general idea is for a pre-workout drink, most of them are caffeinated. and they're stimulants. Most of the pre-workout drinks are stimulants, but I want to take this in a little bit different direction. So I'm not going to give necessarily a brand or one that I kind of say this is really good, and for a couple of reasons. One, I think all of our drinks, all the things we put into our body should be considered pre-workout. They should be feeding our bodies. So when we go to use our bodies and need energy, we have an available energy source. So listen, if you're using a pre-workout drink, listen to what I'm about to say here. If you find that you do much better with a pre-workout drink, which means a stimulant, most likely lots of caffeine just before your workout, means most likely one of two things. One, your mitochondria are tired. And or two, you need more micronutrients to feed your mitochondria. And this is very important to understand this. We have such a focus on like our macronutrients, like our carbs, fats, and proteins. But what feeds the mitochondria are the micronutrients. Those are all the trace minerals and the minerals. And those are not stimulants. Those are just building blocks of things that we need in our bodies. So I'm actually a little bit like most of my clients, especially my concierge clients, when we go deep dive into these conversations, when someone says, "Oh, doc, what's the best pre-workout drink?" So the best one is none. Have some water. If your workout is really hard, isn't that the point? So our egos get in the way. And I literally just had this conversation with one of my clients the other day. He's like, "Doc, I've been using 95-pound dumbbells on the bench press." There's a lot of weight, by the way. At least it is to me. Right. So it's more than like one in each hand. It's more than I weigh. So he said, "I'm nailing them." He's like, "But after about 5, I'm exhausted." And my point is, isn't that the point? Isn't that the point to work your body really hard, put your body under hormesis? And in this conversation, I said, or is your point to get to 96 pounds? Because that doesn't get you any healthier. And he says, well, what? Because I took him off all his pre-workout drinks. He says now he's exhausted. And I told him, you're not exhausted. You're finding out what your body has, what it's truly capable of. And this is what we want. We want to be able to put your body under a natural state of hormesis. You should absolutely positively not need anything to go work out. You shouldn't need it to go work out in the yard. You shouldn't need to go, anything, right? You should already have a fuel source that's constantly feeding your body. Another analogy would be real simple. Then we'll leave this pre-workout drink thing is imagine, just think of your car for a second. If you have a quarter tank or a full tank, it should have the same power. We should not need more to make the human body run better. We should always be putting in what it needs. And if you go with that concept, you don't need a pre, and people don't wake out on me. You don't need a post-workout drink either. All of that stuff was built around the bodybuilding days, and bodybuilding is not natural. It's not healthy. It's fun, but it is short-lived, and you will completely trash your body most likely because of all the things that you do to it. And it's not sustainable. So good, healthy fitness types orientated stuff. Awesome. Eating from God's garden. Awesome. Heck, eating on, working out on an empty stomach is probably my favorite choice for most. And therefore we put our bodies under a little bit more duress and help your body become a little more fat adaptive. So if you have caffeine circulating through you, it says you're certainly not going to burn anything from your fat cell. That's not happening. You will literally use that caffeine as an energy source, driving adrenaline from your adrenal glands. That's exactly what takes place. So you're not necessarily going to be burning more fat. Now, if you say, well, doc, it lets me go an extra hour. Well, what if you just went a half an hour, but it was a lot harder for you? You would have less wear and tear on the body, et cetera, et cetera. So pre-workout, not my favorite thing. In fact, I prefer people not to do it because it's usually just putting you in a false state of energy, which you want to create that energy through your workout anyways.
That's such a great perspective. I think it can lean into this idea that like everything is preparation. So maybe everything that we put in and to our bodies and kind of the choices of the way we spend our time, can that all be preparation to feel like awesome?
Yeah, I think, and I think if we get to that spot philosophically, like when we're eating, our lunch, or I'll eat some dinner in a little bit, we're thinking like, well, what part of my body is this going to fuel? Like what organ is this going to feed? And we start to think of it that way, it probably would help us make different decisions, right? About what we're going to put into the human body. And I always love that conversation about like, how colorful is your plate? How many varieties are there? How many times a week you eat that exact same food? And those, That's a big one. Most of us are eating, the same foods over and over again. So on that topic, yes, I believe the preparation in philosophically looking at it as when we fuel, we're preparing to use our bodies in a nice, healthy way, just like you're going to use your car. Like every time you fuel your car, you probably don't like, all right, now I'm going to drive $1.20 down the road. And then I'm going to, top it off and hit $1.25. You know what I mean? That's, it's a silly analogy, but it's similar.
It works. We have like an adjacent question that was emailed in from our friend Jennifer, kind of a response to our show last week with Dr. Brian. So she was curious, if we are drinking spring water, would you recommend adding like a really awesome salt to that?
Yeah. So if that's a follow from last week, we talked about nitric oxide last week. Awesome. So if you guys missed that, it's really, really eye-opening. So an awesome salt. The challenge is if Jennifer's asking about by adding the salt, would she get the iodine in there? Probably not. The challenge is there's not much iodine available in our table salt because it does evaporate, as Dr. Bryant was talking about. And I'm a huge fan. So with that same question though, my answer is yes, do add sea salt, but not for nitric oxide purposes, but because sea salt is a phenomenal way to get these micronutrients that I was just talking about that every cell, tissue, and organ in the body needs. So I'm a huge fan of using sea salt, even if it was just for supporting your adrenal glands. Big time, big, easy, easy bonus for you to use a little bit. And how much you usually put it just like a pinch of it. So you're not really tasting it. So it's not like salt water you're drinking. Yeah, you just know there's a little extra salt in there.
Awesome. Plus, it's so pretty when you get that really nice pink salt, that Himalayan.
Yeah.
We got another question. Looks like, how do I know if I am insulin resistant? Is there like some kind of testing we can do for IR?
Yes, there is. And this is a good question. This is a topic that should come up all the time when it comes to just our overall general health, especially if you're no longer 20 years old, you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. Oh, heck, you can develop insulin resistance early in life. Yet what insulin resistance is literally when you become resistant to insulin. So insulin is a fat storage hormone. It actually, when we eat like carbohydrates, say we eat a plate of pasta, it comes down into our body, it's broken down in the stomach, and almost immediately that sugar is released out into the bloodstream. So our blood sugar goes up. If we need that energy, that sugar molecule, insulin grabs onto it and brings it into a cell. So we have plenty of energy. Flip side is if we're putting a lot of pasta in there, and then later we put a little bit of ice cream, and then we get up in the morning and there's some waffles, and then we have some breakfast, like a sandwich in the afternoon. We got all these things that are promoting the need for insulin. Insulin then starts to grab onto its store and fat cell. And if you keep doing it day in and day out, which is most of us, the standard American diet is about 75 to 85% carbohydrate driven, right? Milk and cereal, carbohydrates, peanut butter and jelly, carbohydrates, pasta for dinner, bread, etc. So if you keep having this demand for insulin, you develop a resistance to it. So your body literally doesn't, it goes, why? It's almost like a kid that's yelling for mom, 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 mom. Mom stops listening. So your body overproduces insulin resistance. I know this, I'm going to get to the answer to this question as well, but to understand this and why it's so important to test it, to your point, there is a very easy test. If you have insulin resistance, it may be the very reason you cannot lose weight. And you may not be overweight like obese, but there may be pounds sticking to your body, and it may be the very reason you can't lose weight. Because once you become insulin resistant or you're anywhere on the scale, the simplest way to describe it would be this. So I'm not insulin resistant anymore. I was headed that way. Even though I had a good diet, I was eating a lot of carbohydrate driven fruits and whatnot. But anyways, if I eat one piece of bread, for me, let's just say, assumably it produces 1 gram of sugar, and then it just takes 1 molecule of insulin, and I take it out of my body. If someone that's insulin resistant has insulin resistance, it'll take them 5 molecules, and I'm making up for 6. So 1 slice of bread for me is a 1-to-1 relationship. Someone who is insulin resistant, it's 1 to 5. And that is why there are a lot of people out there that could be obese, they could be overweight, that actually have good diets. So How do you know if you're insulin resistant? One, you are having a tough time losing weight. And then second, you test for it. It's such an easy test. There's a test called HOMA-IR. All you need to do is ask your doctor for an insulin resistance test. It's not too expensive. We add it to all our panels that we do, absolutely positively. I won't run a panel without it, because if that resistance is there and part of your goals are to have longevity, part of your goals is to potentially lose weight, to avoid diabetes, to have a good healthy heart, to make sure that your telomeres or your mitochondria are not broken down, you got to know if you have insulin resistance. It's one of the big causes of, thyroid issues and triglycerides in the body. So easy breezy. Yes, you can test for it.
That's so awesome. And then if someone weren't here kind of local with us in Florida, could you still offer that testing to them?
Yes, real simple. All they need to do is email our studio. Maybe you can put our email in the notes if it's not already there. They can email it and we can send them a lab panel wherever they are. We can send you the requisite. You literally will go to either like your local lab corp or blood draw place, send us labs and we can cover them together.
That's so awesome. All right, we got another one here. Let's see. I think I have vertigo. It's a question that we got. What can be done about that? What would we do if we have vertigo?
So vertigo for everyone is a little bit different. So for some people, vertigo, they feel like they're spinning. Some people, they feel like the room is spinning, and some people just describe it as being dizzy. So there's a couple ways we want to think of vertigo, and there's a couple of symptoms that we want to look for. So there is a maneuver, and it's very safe and very effective. It's an easy Google. There's something called an Epley's maneuver. And I'm throwing that out there so people know, because if they have vertigo, you either need to have your doctor perform this for you. And I know a lot of people do it by themselves at home, and I'm not telling you to diagnose or treat anything, but it's safe and effective. So what happens typically in vertigo, there's usually, I find two primary causes. In one, there's what we have what's called these crystals in our ears. So like when I tilt my head to one side, those crystals kind of float up and they keep my equilibrium. So my eyes always end up even. And so I don't lose my balance. Sometimes we can have a head cold, we can have something going on and get a little stuffy or congested or dehydrated even, or too much stress going on. And those crystals, when I tilt my head, can get stuck. And then all of a sudden I don't get the equilibrium, and literally my body, I start to get dizzy. And people very predictably say, well, every time I turn to the left or every time I move to the right or I roll over in bed this particular way, and it's because those crystals are stuck there. So that's kind of the cause of it. There's a second cause of it is our adrenals regulate blood pressure. And when we are overly stressed, overly tired, and our adrenals are getting a bit on the fatigue side, when we change positions, especially when we change, going from up to down, et cetera, when we change, like bending over and then standing up quick, your blood pressure has to change to regulate, gravity, or going with, against gravity, or going with gravity, or the vice versa there. And when you bend over, it's easier for your heart. So you can actually lower your blood pressure, but going into downward dog. So that's real. Like, I know that sounds weird, like how yoga helps blood pressure, but literally downward dog will lower your blood pressure. If you have a little thing on your wrist, you'll see your blood pressure go down, which is pretty cool. The moment you stand up, you're against gravity and the blood all has to go back up to your heart. And then your blood pressure goes back up. But what regulates that in part is your adrenal glands. If your adrenal glands are tired and you don't have enough vitamin C and you don't have enough copper and your body's don't have enough sea salt or electrolytes into your body, all of these things, too much stress, what's going on, all of a sudden you stand up and you get dizzy. Or maybe it's when you bend over, you get dizzy. Either one of those. And I think we've all, if you're moving your body around, you're doing forward folds in yoga, you come up one day, you're like, whoa, I just got a little dizzy. And usually it dissipates in about, under a minute. If you're experiencing that type of vertigo or dizziness, that's more of an adrenal thing. And that's something, Whitney, that, I recommend get with your practitioner, get with someone who understands what state you're going to be, meaning what state of adrenal dysfunction or even fatigue you might be in. If, it is something that can be tested very easily. It's an at-home saliva test. So that's very effective. But if you notice that's happening, same thing with ringing in the ears. It's a different symptom of vertigo. So some people don't get the dizziness, they don't get the wound, but they just get ringing in the ears. And that leans in that direction of the adrenal dysfunction as well. So we see a lot of that, probably a real lot of that. And the good news is it's very fixable. And again, that's something I would recommend. Get with your practitioner who is familiar with, working with someone that has a little bit of adrenal fatigue, understanding how and what to do, to move you back in the direction. So that's not an okay symptom. And important that I say this as well. Never fight being dizzy. If you're dizzy, stay put. Literally grab onto something, hold it. If you try to fight it and try to walk it off or just stubbornly kind of make it to the bathroom, it often gets worse fast. And that's where we see a lot of people fall. And that's not okay. That's when people can get injured. You can get a brain injury or something like that. So make sure, never fight dizziness, never fight vertigo. Just give it a moment. Almost always it'll pass. If if it doesn't pass shortly, you will get some help and you get yourself, over to a doctor and talk to them. And often you have to bring up, for some, you have to bring up that maneuver. It's called Epley's maneuver. And everyone should be kind of familiar with it because it's real easy to perform and it's harmless, which is pretty cool.
Well, the yoga teacher in me loves the idea that down dog can give you a bit of ease straight away. And you don't even need a yoga mat for that. You can just go right down on the hands and feet.
Well, inevitably as a teacher, the next time, there's, you see people in there always checking their calories burned and all their stuff with their watches. You should ask them, does your blood pressure go down in downward dog? And the answer is yes. My wife and I, when we used to do our runs, if we would do these, kind of hit exercises where we would pick it up, slow down, pick it up, slow down, pick it up, slow down. That was like a fast way. It's like a hit running, I guess you would call it, high intensity interval training. And to get our blood pressures down real fast, we'd go to down dog. So we'd go from a sprint to a down dog and to be blown away, it would drop. And we get to a certain point, back down to regulated, back into the 65%, and then we'd get back up and then take off again. And it was fascinating to watch. And then if mind was you're talking and stuff like that, wouldn't go down as fast. But if you just focused on your breathing, went into a nice downward dog and got some good breathing going on, it's crazy how fast it works. So yes, even in yoga class, good things. Yes. Blood pressure dropping.
Bonus.
Yes.
And
bonus.
Plus, you get to look like a weirdo if you're running outside and then pop down for a down dog.
Yeah.
Nothing bad about that. Well, we are almost out of time here, Bart. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as we got started this evening. We've got one very important question to close us up here. What is one step that our listeners can take towards becoming superhuman?
And today, I'm gonna say that it's to make sure that we celebrate. So, with all loss, with all trauma, with all challenges that we have in life, if we're here to be able to reflect upon them afterwards, there's room for celebration. So if you haven't celebrated, you don't need a reason why. Go celebrate something tonight, go celebrate something else, whatever it may take. But that's going to be my tip tonight, is to celebrate.
Celebration. Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for another Health Made Simple show. We will be back next week.
Yes, and of course, thank everyone. Appreciate you guys. I know we got started a little late tonight, but that is the beauty of all of this. It's no big deal. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Keep doing the thing, keep sharing it out, keep spreading the love, and of course, take deliberate action for your mind, your body, overall wellness. You gotta be awesome.